This is the lecture for European history for Friday the 15th. It is Good Friday, and it is also tax day for European history. We just saw a set of extended clips, end of last class, beginning of this class, from the 1980s version of the movie The Razor's Edge, based on the novel by W. Somerset Maugham. And The Razor's Edge is a classic novel about the lost generation. We talked yesterday about the lost generation meaning many things. For example, obviously it means the men who died. They're lost to the world. What's a bit more subtle is not only are they lost to the world at the moment, but their future contributions, whatever they would have done or their children, are also lost to the world. Anyone they would have influenced, that's all gone. But the lost generation is also about the men who came back changed. A new term was developed in World War I called shell shock. Shell shock is what happens to a human being under the stresses of trench warfare battle. Now, there have always been people who've snapped under stresses of battle. That's one of the most horrific environments human beings engage in. So it makes sense that people would just go, bye, there their sanity goes, at least for a while, maybe forever. But being under an intense shelling attack for days or weeks is just something the human nervous system was not designed for. So sometimes people snap. And it happened enough for the public to develop a new term, doctors as well, shell shock. And if you look on YouTube, I'm not going to show them to you, but if you really want to see World War I shell shock victims, you can see men hopping around like chickens or clucking or banging their heads against cement walls or doing just insane things because they're gone. Their conscious mind is either too traumatized to come back or it's come back broken and wrong. They are unmanned by this experience. They are no longer in control of anything. Not their bodies, not their words, not their mind, nothing. One of the things I do when I talk about language and my hatred for euphemism, which you're going to hear about when we talk about the final solution, the extermination of Jews of Europe, is that as we go on from World War I into the contemporary world, we get more euphemistic. In World War II, the same condition is called battle fatigue. Battle fatigue. It sounds like you're tuckered out after running, some laps. What does he have? He has battle fatigue. He's still, bam, 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 bam. It's not 2 syllables, shell shock, which convey power and suffering. It's 4 syllables, battle fatigue. It's milder. It's easier to deal with. In Vietnam, we developed what is still the current term for it, and it's expanded beyond the military. Can anyone guess the 16-syllable word? Or let's see. I think it's 8 syllables. Still, we'll go from 2 to 4 to 8. 8-syllable word or words that reference this.
Post-traumatic stress.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the same freaking thing. But it sounds like you've got halitosis, which is bad breath. What does he have? Oh, he has post-traumatic stress disorder. It's still, if you're dealing with battle fatigue or shell shock, the same very condition. Human beings shattering under the shock of artillery and of machine guns and of the existential reality that your existence may be winked out, snuffed out, or you may end up maimed, which is worse. Or you may end up trapped and buried alive, which is worse. Young men are often willing to die because dying is an unknown. But usually young men are not willing to voluntarily be maimed or or buried alive or anything like that, because who would? So, in the story, Larry Darrow comes back from the war, and I don't think they do a bad job of this. I think they do a pretty good job, which is why I show it to you, of him being honest with the people around him and saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not getting married to you. I'm not taking a job as a stockbroker. I'm not doing that. I lived. I don't know why. I'm going to figure that out, I guess. It's a lack of commitment that people who've never been through battle have difficulty comprehending. They just don't understand. So he goes to France, but not as a tourist, not on the Mauritania, the cruise ship. He works his way across as a hand on a tramp steamer. And then he gets a job in Paris packing fish. And then he ends up working in a coal mine. It's not that he doesn't want to do things. It's that he doesn't want to do things that require a mental dedication and emotional commitment. Because he's not comfortable within his skin. Now, my mom, as a detective for the Wallingford Police Department, dealt with the victims of sexual assault. She dealt with cases that Vietnam and Korea combat veterans who were her colleagues didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. But she was a woman. Her experience to become a detective was she was a successful teacher in the Southeast Bronx, which is a war zone then and it's a war zone now. And the idea of being the victim of a sexual assault, many of them describe wanting to jump out of their own bodies, wanting to jump out of their own flesh, not being comfortable at all inside your own skin. And somebody with shell shock or PTSD, we don't even say the words anymore, we just use the initials. I hate euphemisms. Often feel the same way. How can a man like Larry Darrow be capable of doing a job that requires intense mental effort, or of being in a marriage that's based on earning a lot of money, when he can barely function just going in, breathing in and out of, while you're awake and then going back to sleep. So he does physical work that doesn't require much mental effort. He reads, he thinks. And then he goes to India. Now, this is a very British thing. Again, Maugham is a Brit writing about Americans. But in Britain, because India was a colony of Britain, and because India is an ancient civilization, much older than the Anglo-Saxon country of England, there is this sense of ancient knowledge and wisdom. There's also this sense that Indians live with poverty that would destroy most of us. As a normal thing, they live with that kind of poverty. And they're not broken. So there is a wisdom there that the British see. So where we left off, Larry had not only gone to India, but he met the guy who owned the boats, who prayed while he did dishes, and they ended up making the journey to the Tibetan monastery, the Buddhist monastery in the mountains, the sort of monastery that the Chinese Communist Party has wiped out and replaced with things run by communists that are travesties of what they once were. The lost generation is not merely the dead. It's not merely the unrequited possibilities of the lives they would have touched had they lived. The lost generation are the men who live also, who come back alive, but they lose themselves. Larry's lost. Now, read the book or see the rest of the movie to find out how he finds himself again. I will give you enough of a spoiler alert to tell you that. As to the people he's dealing with, when Haley yesterday said she didn't like Sophie, the girl that he went out to dinner with and said, I'm not interested in getting a bigger house, living in a big house and getting a new car every year, nor am I interested in being around people who want to live in a big house and have a new car every year. That girl. What happens when she encounters the relative poverty of lower middle class or working class life in Paris? The giant roach, the communal bathroom without a toilet. Well, what she does is probably what most of us would do because we're not used to that. But then she immediately marries Gray. So, see the movie, learn the story. It's an interesting one. But do you have any questions, comments, or thoughts about The Lost Generation before we move into totalitarianism in Soviet Russia? Fair enough. Okay, item E. The society of the Russian Empire is ripped apart by the war. The industrial societies of Europe are barely able to hold on in the fight. In 1916, 1917, 1918, Russia is barely industrialized. It has a handful of industrial centers, which are islands in a vast sea, like archipelagos in the Pacific. And it cannot handle the strain. So the Tsar is forced to abdicate, and the Russian army collapses. And there was a quick clip I wanted to show you that depicts this. It's just a couple of minutes long, but it shows the Russian Imperial Army, lights and shades, please, at the breaking point.